Hi, this is Cayelin Castell again, and we're going to take a look at some aspect patterns that are created by combinations of aspects that come together that we touched on in one of the previous recordings. We'll also be looking at reading an ephemeris, and it's really important to know how to do this, and to successfully read an ephemeris, you really do need to know the symbols for the signs and the planets. And I'll just go through and show you some different parts of the ephemeris so that you will know how to do the basic reading of ephemeris. I will do a follow-up to this at a later date when we get to the next course. So the aspect patterns that we're going to look at are called the T-square, the grand cross, the grand trine, the kite, and the Star of David. And these form very specific patterns based on how the planets are aligning with each other. So the first one we'll look at is the T-square. It is a half of a square, so it has two squares and an opposition. Now, if it had two more squares, say there was a planet that was here and it was squaring Venus and squaring Neptune, then we'd have a grand square or a grand cross, and we'll be looking at the grand cross in a moment. So the way that traditional astrology looks at the T-square is to say that it's like an impossible contradiction that creates a push for success and at the same time can feel like it will never happen. So oftentimes people who have a T-square can even feel, even if they don't have a Saturn configuration on their chart, it can sometimes feel very Saturn-like because it's that can feel unfair. That that they're driven, they're wanting to get things accomplished, and it doesn't always feel like it works the way they want it to. Now that's not necessarily the intention, but that's the initial encounter with this kind of a signature. Once a person has mastered the qualities of this, so for example, here's Venus in Aries squared by Uranus and opposed by Neptune. Initially, it can feel like the Aries fire is put out by Neptune, and it's more empathic and feeling and taking on other people's stuff. Uranus is always wanting to create change and have a bigger picture, but it's being squared by Neptune, and and so that poor Venus can feel kind of confused at first. But once Neptune and Uranus are working together, and Venus in Aries is coming online, she's getting committed to her cause and her purpose, then these aspects can be very helpful and supportive. So any kind of aspect pattern like this can have its initial challenges that a person encounters in their life, and then it can become a gift. It can become a blessing. It's like when we take those challenges and turn them into opportunities, turn them into blessings. That is really the intent of any aspect, any way that the planets are in relationship to one another. So the grand cross is, now we can see here's a T-square here, here's a T-square here. You could actually say here's a T-square here, and there's a T-square here. So basically, the grand cross is filling in all the points of they'll have an opposition, and they'll have the squares, 4 squares, and so it's an amazingly challenging kind of aspect on a person's chart. But these are the people that, when they master it, are truly amazing. Oftentimes, enlightened beings, people who have been considered enlightened masters, have this kind of a dynamic grand cross energy on their chart. So the challenge is then to balance the opposing energies, and it's coming from all 4 directions. So if you see there's oppositions, and then of course there's squares on all of that. So sometimes what can happen for a person who has this, and this can happen in the T-square too, but it's challenging to pick something and pick a direction and move in it, because it feels like there's pressure from all sides. But again, potential for dynamic growth when it's worked with consciously, and there's some gifts that can come from this once the tension, the dynamic tension, has been dealt with, and it is an impetus, it is a push to a greater growth. So I just also wanted to share this grand cross for April 23rd, 2014, you can see that Jupiter at 13, Cancer 55, Mars at 13, Libra 34, Pluto at 13, Capricorn 34, and Uranus at 13, Aries 40. It's one of the closest grand crosses I've ever seen, and looking at this in all the years. In fact, it is the closest. We'll just go ahead and say that. And so by the time you're hearing this recording, we may know the results of what that is, but I'm actually doing the recording before the exact grand cross has taken place. But this is an example of something that showing up in the sky in a current time. And anybody born on April 23rd, 2014 will carry this signature of this particular grand cross as part of what they're working with in their life. Now, the grand trine is usually in an element, so it can be in fire, water, earth, air. Sometimes part of the grand trine may not be exactly in that element, but it usually is an element. So it tends to represent mastery in the element that the person has the grand trine in. Now, just how, it's like mastery they're bringing in with them in that particular element. And so going back and listening to the elements class will give you a sense of what is the fire element and what that mastery might be. Now, the other thing to know is that whenever the sun is trine a planet, that planet has either just stationed retrograde or is about to station direct. So basically it is stopped in the sky. It's at a still point. It's not moving very much. So there's not a lot of energy that's involved in a trine. So it's considered in traditional astrology to be, to represent sort of a mastery. Oh, it's a really good fortunate thing. But unless you're motivated to use it, it may not mean anything at all. So unless there's squares or oppositions that are connected to that grand trine, there's nothing that necessarily motivates it to be active, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. I studied with an astrologer many years ago who said that it's like the energy just kind of runs around. It never goes anywhere. And another way to describe it is to say it's like if you have a tremendous ability, say you're an amazing athlete, or you're somebody who has great talent at singing, but you never do it, then what's the point in having that talent? It's kind of the same thing with the grand trine. If you have certain talents and gifts you've been given and you never use them, then it's kind of a waste, but there might not be impetus for that person to use it. All right, so let's look at the kite. Now this is a opposition. Pluto here opposite Mercury, and Pluto's at the top of the grand trine, and Mercury is sextiling Venus, and it's also sextiling the moon. So it's creating this imagery of kind of, I guess I don't know why they call it a kite exactly, but anyway, it always features an opposition with two sextiles to the points in the trine. So each point of the trine is being activated by a planet that sits in opposition to one of the points in the trine. So it could be at this point, or it could be opposite. Say there was a planet here like Mars in Libra opposite Venus in Aries, and it would be sextile the moon and sextile Pluto. That would create the kite from a different direction. So it doesn't always look like a kind of this upright kite. Anyway, this is thought to really produce more favorable results in the world of form because there's impetus, there's that the opposition to have the energy go somewhere to be taken out into the world. That's created by an opposition in a grand trine that creates that kite energy. Now the last aspect we're going to look at is the Star of David, and that is when there's two trines. So here we have an earth trine, and it's a water trine with air. These planets almost in early degrees Cancer, but they're still in late degrees Gemini. So out of sign. This is actually a chart of someone I know very well. And then there's sextiles between each of the planets. Um, so it creates what's referred to as a Star of David or a grand sextile. And so, you've got the double grand trine, meaning that the this energy of the elements of earth and water in this case are very much active. And also you've got oppositions coming out from each point of the trine that are creating like a six-pointed star as well. So it's just a very fascinating configuration to look at. These are thought to be really stable and protective influences, and it's usually multifaceted, expending energy, so it can go in many different directions. And the challenge is that a person, even though they have a lot of energy, if they don't use it consciously, they can burn out. They can just do too much. And I happen to know that the person who has this grand sextile, the Star of David, was a person who for many years really burned a lot of energy and eventually had to step back and start doing something different. So those are the aspect patterns that you might see. Now you'll see lots of charts that have none of these aspect patterns on them, and that doesn't mean that those charts are any better or more important or less important than any others. It's just that it's helpful to know what these aspect patterns look like. And also, because a lot of times people will say, wow, you've got a grand trine, or you've got a Star of David, or, oh my gosh, you've got a grand cross, like it's a bad thing. It's not. All of these aspects, everything that happens on anybody's chart, all has purpose, all has intent, and it's not better or worse than anybody else's aspects or experience or whatever they have. We've all been given, we've all taken on a journey of the soul, and these aspects are just giving us information about what that journey is like for us. So now we're going to look at how to read the ephemeris. And here's just some covers of some different ephemerises that you might have. Here's the 1900 to 2000 20th century ephemeris. This one's from 2000 to 2100. This one's just a 50-year ephemeris from 2000 to 2050. And this one's from 1950 to 2050. So you can look back into the previous century and look forward. And if you're a person who was born in the later part of the last century or in the early part of this century, this might be a really good ephemeris for you to have. If you know a lot of people that were born before 1950, you'll definitely still need to have the 20th century ephemeris. I really like the 1950 to 2050 ephemeris, but there are times when you'll maybe if you're traveling and you encounter somebody who was born before 1950, you can't look up their chart. So the reasons for reading an ephemeris is you want to be able to look up someone's birthday. So sometimes you don't have a computer, you don't have access to running a chart, you can look up their information. I know that in my early years of doing readings for people, I sometimes went to like a Whole Life Expo or someplace that had a booth, and I would do little mini readings for people, and I just had an ephemeris. This was in the days before you could have run a chart on your smartphone. But anyway, but there's other reasons for having an ephemeris, because it's a great way to look for past events and future events and just be able to look through. You don't have to run a chart for each specific time. You can really just kind of track back and look at what was going on in certain years. And you can also look up retrogrades, when a planet is going retrograde, when a planet is going direct. You can look that up very quickly. It's very helpful. And you also can look up when planets are changing into new signs. So there's lots of great reasons for knowing how to read an ephemeris. So this is an image out of an ephemeris for March of 2020. I just picked a year ahead. And so I'm just going to share with you what you're looking at. So up here we have the day, so March 1st, and that happens to be a Sunday in 2020. We've got sidereal time. I don't ever pay attention to the sidereal time piece. I don't use it, but there's a great description in the beginning of the book that just talks about what sidereal time is if you're interested in knowing that. And this is the symbol for the sun. And on the first day of March of 2020, the sun is at 10 degrees Pisces, 51 minutes and 54 seconds. So this third column here happens to do with the seconds. So it's actually 10 Pisces 52. It's closer to 52 than 51, if you wanted to round that up. And then the next day, the sun is at 11 Pisces 52. So when you're looking down, well, I'll show you in another column. Actually, here in Venus. Venus is in Aries when we begin the month at 25, 26 Aries. And then on the 6th of March, it has gone into Taurus, and it's already 57 minutes into Taurus. So basically, on the day before, on March 5th, sometime on March 5th, Venus went into Taurus, and then you'll have Taurus all the way down until it goes into Gemini. So whenever a planet is changing signs, you'll see it. If you want to see what the sign is, it's only at the very top of the page or as it's changed into the new sign. So this is again why it's important to know your symbols when you're reading the Ephemeris. So we've got the sun here, and it's moving about 1 degree a day. You can see it's 10:52, 11:52, 12:52, 13:52, 14:52. As it's going through the month, it is moving about 1 degree a day. The moon, on the other hand, is moving 12 to 15 degrees a day. So as we start the month of March, it's at 20 Taurus at 11 minutes and 12 seconds. And then at midnight, 0 hour means midnight. And then at noon, it was at 26 Taurus and 15 minutes, which basically means the thing to know is that the moon is moving approximately 1 degree every 2 hours. Sometimes it's moving a little bit quicker than that, so it's just an estimate. And this ephemeris is calculated for universal time or Greenwich time, and depending on where you are. So if a person was born on the East Coast, it's 5 hours earlier. So if a planet was changing signs, so say the moon at noon is at 26 Taurus, it only has about 4 degrees to go before it gets into the next sign. That's 8 hours. So before this day was out, the moon changed into Taurus, and in fact we can see on March 2nd that the moon is at 2 degrees and 22 minutes of Gemini at midnight. So we know that the moon turned into Gemini by the end of this day, somewhere at the end of this day, and it depends on what time zone you're in. So if a person, if you're looking up somebody's chart or looking at wanting to find out where the moon was on that day for a person, if they told you they were born early in the day, then pretty sure they have a Taurus moon. But if they were born afternoon, then it would also depend because again, Eastern time is 5 hours earlier. If you go all the way to the Pacific time, it's 8 hours earlier. So that could be a whole 4 degrees difference. So by noon, on the Pacific time, it could have already moved into Gemini. So this is something where you just have to learn how to calculate or just sort of estimate. Sometimes if you think it's close, you could tell the person, well, it looks like you have either a Taurus moon or a Gemini moon, depending on what time of the day you were born. And if they know, well, I was definitely born in the morning, then you could say, well, it's probably a Taurus moon. If they were born in the afternoon, then you'd say it's probably definitely a Gemini moon for that person. Now, this is the node. It's called the true node. And I'm not going to go into the definition of that. They actually give a definition in the Ephemeris. You can look it up. But as we start the month, it's at 5 Cancer and 49 minutes. It is shaded. And so any planet that is shaded is retrograde. And actually the true direction of the nodes is they're precessing through the signs. They're moving backwards through the signs. That is their actual regular movement. So this means that the nodes have been in Cancer for a long time and probably are going to be moving into the next sign. And because it's moving back, it would be moving into Gemini probably in the next few months, probably depending on the eclipse seasons and how that works. But we're not looking that far into the ephemeris right now. Anyway, so then it goes direct for a couple days, and then it's going retrograde. So the D means direct, and the R means retrograde. Here we have Mercury starting on March 1st, 2020, is retrograde. And it always will give the sign, and then it will give the retrograde, but it's shaded. And it's getting ready to complete its retrograde. And it on March 9th, 28 degrees Aquarius. So it actually is retrograded back from Pisces, and on the 5th of March, it's at 2940, which means that it on sometime on March 4th, it actually went back into Aquarius. So by midnight on the 5th, it was already back into Aquarius. And then on the 9th, March 9th, it went direct, and it always puts the direct right underneath when it ends the shaded area. So the retrogrades are always shaded, so they're easy to spot and to look for when you're looking in an ephemeris. And here we have Mars in Capricorn, 919. Mars is moving about 1 degree every 2 days, and you can see that on March 2nd it is at 10, on March 3rd it's still at 10, and then on March 4th it actually moves to 11. And on March 5th it's at 12, on March 6th it's at 12, and then it's actually moving to 13. So it's about 2 degrees, or 1 degree every 2 days. It's approximate thing. So these are the main things, and then the rest of the planets are over here. I couldn't quite get that all in the picture, but this gives you a sense of how to look at the ephemeris, looking at a page in the ephemeris. Now, if you look at the bottom of the page of an ephemeris, you're going to see this kind of information: astro data and planet ingress. So in March of 2020, Mercury is retrograde, and on the 4th of March, it re-enters Aquarius at 11:09 a.m., and that is Universal Time or Greenwich Time. So that means it's 5 hours earlier on the East Coast and 8 hours earlier in the West Coast and Pacific Time. So it would actually be a lot earlier in the day. Venus goes into Taurus on March 5th, and it's at 3:08 a.m. So they're using military time, because we can see Mars goes into Aquarius on March 30th at 1944, almost like 7:44 in the afternoon or in the evening, almost 8 o'clock at night. So using military time, so they don't have to put in AM and PM. So this is showing the planetary ingresses into new signs. So each month, so you can look in the ephemeris to see when the planets are ingressing into new signs. This is for the month of March, and this is for the month of April. It does that. There's 2 months on each page, so each page of the ephemeris, which I didn't really show here, but if you're looking at ephemeris, you'll see that. The astro data is showing that Mercury is direct on the 10th day, and it's at 3:49 a.m. Again, Universal Time. The moon is at 0 degrees south of 0 degrees south of the ecliptic on the 11th of March at 4:16. So if we go back to, let me go back that far, March 11th, and you see the moon or on the 10th it goes into Libra, and so that's why the declination is showing declination. This is very much like complicated, and the stuff you don't necessarily need to know. Again, you can read in the beginning of the ephemeris about this information, but just so you get a sense of what that's about. And then the last aspect in the moon ingress, so it's telling you what time the moon is going into a new sign on the day, but again, this is universal time. But that's helpful information if you're trying to calculate somebody's moon position. And the first one is for March, and the second one is for April. And so this is stuff that I don't use it that much. I very rarely use this. But the last aspect is describing when the moon is going to go void of course. And we don't work with void of course moon in shamanic astrology. So at 15, but I'll just explain this. On March 1st at about 4 in the afternoon, almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon, almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Saturn was trine the moon, and then it went into Gemini at 7:22 in the evening, at 19:22 in the evening. So it was void, of course, for about 4 hours. Let's see, actually from 3:53 to night, so about 4 hours, yeah. So about a little less than 4 hours. So that's basically what this is showing you, the void of course aspect. Again, this is not stuff that you really need to know, but I just wanted to tell you so that you can understand what those things are about, and then you don't need to pay attention to them anymore, because it's just can be very confusing. But what you may want to pay attention to actually is just this is good information. And I took May because it was easier to get the image for that. May of 2020, May 1st. The Julian day has to do with the Julian calendar, and there's an explanation in the book. SVP is the Senetic vernal point, or the tropical 0 degree in the sidereal zodiac, is defined by Cyril Fagan. So it's telling, it'll be 4:58 Pisces. So if you talk to a Vedic astrologer, they will tell you that tropical astrologers don't know what they're talking about, because the sun actually is rising at 4 degrees and 58 minutes of Pisces, or in the constellation of the fish, also known as Pisces, because their sidereal means with the stars. So it's the sidereal zodiac is connected to the stars. 0 Aries is what astronomers and tropical astrologers use, recognizing that when the sun reaches 0 Aries, it's a seasonal point that has nothing to do with the stars. And in shamanic astrology, we recognize that it's rising in the fish. But that's what this is showing. And basically, you'll see, even in June, it's this, it's barely moving. It's pretty much staying in the same degree for a very long time. It moves 1 degree every 72 years, ultimately. This is galactic center. So 27 Sagittarius 07 is where galactic center is located. And that is changing very slowly also. If you look through Ephemeris over time, again, 1 degree perhaps every 72 years, 26,000 years for it to go completely around. Now, galactic center is slightly below the ecliptic, and so this is measured from the ecliptic, and that's their measurement. Now we see this is the asteroids Eris, Chiron, Pallas Athena, Juno, and Vesta. And so those are being added into the Ephemeris just for the first day of the month. So the first day that's where it was. So if we look at Chiron, it's at 7:24 Aries on the 1st of May, and on the 1st of June it's at 8:44. So it hasn't moved a lot. It's like 1 degree over that month, a little over a degree. Eris is even slower, moving just a few minutes, 24 degrees Aries to 03 to 24 degrees Aries 21, and then it goes retrograde a lot. So it's going to hang out at that degree for a long time. Now Pallas Athena is at 0 Aquarius in 6 minutes at the beginning of May, and then it goes retrograde. So at the beginning of June, it's at 0:13. So this is the R next to any of these will mean that it's retrograde. And of course, we have the mean node. Now, the mean node is the regular motion, and they can calculate it for any day in the month for noon, and it's given for the first day. So it's a little bit different way of calculating the node, and in the Ephemeris, as we saw back here, that they're giving the true node, and then they give the mean node in the bottom, at the bottom of the page. So this information is also not information you're probably going to use that much, unless you're wanting to look up, um, perhaps maybe look up the some of the asteroids and where they are. But you probably really, if you're going to work with asteroids, you'll need to get an asteroid ephemeris. Now, but this part at the bottom that could be very useful is to know the moon phases and eclipses. So in May, on the 7th of May, it looks like at 10:46 a.m. there's a full moon. The symbol for the full moon. This is the symbol for the full moon. Is at 17 Scorpio and 20 minutes. And then on the 14th, we have the last quarter moon. So here's the symbol for the last quarter moon. It's always facing like a C. It looks more like a C at 24 Aquarius. It's happening at 14:04, and that's like 2:04 in the afternoon. And then on the 22nd is a new moon at 2 Gemini. On the 30th, we have the first quarter moon at 9 Virgo and 12 minutes. So that's for the month of May. This is the month of June. June 5th, we have a full moon at 15 Sagittarius, but we also have an eclipse. So whenever you see this symbol, which is an opposition symbol, and it's blacked out, it means that it's an eclipse. And with the A here, it means it's an annular eclipse. If it had a T, it would be it would be a total eclipse. If it was a P, it would be a partial eclipse. So there's different symbols, and you can read about that on the front of your ephemeris. And then we have, again, the last quarter moon, and then a new moon, and it's an annular eclipse as well. So this is the conjunction. So the new moon is always when the sun and the moon are conjunct, the solar eclipse, and the lunar eclipse is always when it's at a full moon. And you can readily see that and track that through the ephemeris for however many years your ephemeris is located. So the skills that we've covered here are looking at the signs and symbols in all of these different courses that we've done so far. We've looked at the signs and their symbols, the planets and their symbols. We've looked at the elements and modalities, and that gives us a way to look at aspects and also to understand some of the energies that are in the different signs and what that means. We've also looked at houses and the energy of the houses and how to determine what that means and what the energy of the houses is about. We've looked at aspects and the relationship between the planets, what aspects they form and their aspect patterns. And we also learned how to draw up a chart, and we learned about the chart as a map and then how to draw that chart and how to determine the aspects on the chart, the simple dynamic aspects anyway. And we also looked at how to read an ephemeris. So ideally, you have all the skills that you need now in order to be able to read a chart. And, this is stuff that will take time. It takes practice. And definitely come back and listen to these audios again if you don't remember certain things, or if you need to be activated and reminded then of how certain things work. And also, as you gain some skill and you go back and listen to some of these recordings, you're going to find that you understand them so much better than maybe you did the first time through. The thing to remember is that we're making new pathways through the brain to be able to look at this information and to understand this information. It's like learning a new language. And there's really some very simple things that if you know them, and you know how to work with them, it's pretty easy. It just can seem very overwhelming at first when you're being introduced to all these new different things to look at and to keep track of. So I encourage everyone to maybe just go back and listen to everything once again and see how well you're doing and how much you've learned as you've gone through each of these courses. It'll be amazing to you. I know when we've had people come to our live events, the very first one they come to and they get all this information that's very technical, it can be overwhelming. But then when they come back to additional events and they've worked with this information a little bit, then they realize that they've learned a lot and they maybe didn't think they had until they have that experience. So again, these are the additional resources that you can tune into. And if you want to get natal charts for you or other people, again, you can go to alib.com and get a free chart. Or if we highly recommend that you use SolarFire or Sky Engine. SolarFire is easier for beginners, I think, to work with, and we have links on the Shamanic Astrology website. If you choose to purchase that software program, we just get a commission. It costs you the same whether you go directly to SolarFire or go through the school. The school gets a little bit of extra support and money for that. So I highly recommend that you consider supporting the school if you decide to get either of the Sky Engine program or the SolarFire program. So thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure to share these mysteries with you.